ever feel like, I don't know, the rules of relationships just changed without anyone telling us, especially us guys, you know? Today we're going deep on this. The book is Mad Women, How Psychotherapy Puts Society on the Couch by Conrad Riker.
Oh, interesting.
Should be pretty relevant to what we talk about a lot here.
For sure.
Now, before we jump in, got to make this clear. We're not saying mental health struggles aren't real. Okay.
Right.
This is more about like how some approaches to therapy might actually be making things worse.
Intentionally, yeah.
Especially for men. You with me?
Absolutely. Riker's argument is bold. He's saying some ways we try to address societal problems are actually making them worse.
Like, give me an example.
Well, he talks about no-fault divorce. And then there's the whole man drought thing.
Okay, yeah, those are definitely hot button topics. And I know you guys listening, you're deep into covert contracts and all that red pill stuff. This should resonate.
Connects directly.
Lay it on me. How does no-fault divorce play into all this?
Okay, so covert contracts, right? Those unspoken expectations we have in relationships.
Yeah.
We think they're there, but we never really talk about them.
Yeah, like we just assume everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. Riker's saying no-fault divorce blew up this huge covert contract about what marriage even meant.
Okay, I'm listening. What was the contract and how did things change?
Back in the day, there was this understanding, right? Leaving a marriage, that was serious business, big consequences, especially for women.
Financially, socially, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, so it was a much bigger decision to walk away. But then, no-fault divorce comes along, and those consequences, poof, gone.
So now it's easier to get divorced.
Way easier. And guess what happened?
Divorce rates went up.
Rocketed. We're talking like double what they used to be.
Wow.
Almost half of all marriages now end in divorce.
That's wild. Okay, so more divorce. How does that lead to this man drought? I know it's about fewer available men, right? More single women than men.
You got it. And guess who initiates most divorces these days?
Oh, I guess. Women. Bingo.
Interesting.
It's not about blaming women. It's just the rules changed. And it's had a huge impact, especially on the dating scene.
Okay, but is this man drought a real thing or just something guys are talking about? What do the numbers say?
Oh, it's real. And the numbers back it up. Think about it. Since no-fault divorce, that divorce rate, we said, it's doubled, right?
Yeah.
That means way more single people out there.
Yeah.
And if women are initiating most of those splits,
Makes sense.
more single women, fewer single men. Simple math.
So this ties into the whole red pill thing then. The guys who feel like the dating world is like rigged against them.
Totally. If you're feeling that way, Riker's research, it might give you some answers.
Yeah, it makes you think. And it all goes back to those covert contracts, doesn't it? Like what other unspoken agreements are messing things up?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's not just dating. This affects the whole picture.
Yeah.
You know, society, economic.
Yeah.
Riker argues this whole shift, it's hit single mothers hard financially.
Did you know like 80% of single parent homes below the poverty line, they're headed by single moms?
Geez, I had no idea. It really makes you think about like the unintended consequences of stuff,
Yeah.
you know? So if guys are feeling disillusioned with marriage, where does that leave them?
That's the question, right? Riker brings up a point that I know will resonate with the married red pill guys.
Yeah.
Could it be, and this is what he asks, could it be that the system, as it is now, is actually encouraging some women to leave marriages? And if that's true, what does it mean for the guys who are trying to, you know, make their existing relationships work?
Definitely something to ponder. But Riker doesn't stop there, right?
Yeah.
He gets into over-medication too. Kids being over-medicated.
Big time. Especially ADHD diagnoses.
Yeah, I know that's a concern for a lot of our listeners.
He even tells this story about a kid, Timmy, bright kid, but he was put on meds and he kind of withdrew and his progress actually stalled.
That's like we're so quick to slap a label on kids these days, you know? ADHD, anxiety, whatever. Then, bam, here's a prescription.
Right.
But what if it's not the kid? What if it's the environment they're in?
Exactly.
That's what Riker's asking us to consider.
That's the question. Is it really ADHD? Or are some kids just not built for like the traditional school system? All those standardized tests and sitting still all day.
Yeah, good point. I know a lot of you guys are into alternative schooling. Maybe that's part of the solution.
Could be.
Finding environments that work better for boys, the way they learn.
Absolutely.
Riker's not saying ADHD isn't real.
Right.
He's just saying, hey, let's be more careful about how we diagnose and treat it.
Think critically.
Are we actually getting to the root of the problem?
That's the key.
Or are we just masking symptoms with pills and what happens down the line if we do that?
Long-term consequences.
So it's not just boys being boys.
Maybe not.
It could be the system itself, you know, failing them, even pushing them towards meds when they don't need them.
It's a possibility.
And this all ties back to, guess what? Covert contract. What are we expecting from boys? Are those expectations even fair? Are we as men even part of the problem?
Big question.
It's like those layers of the onion, man. The more you peel back,
It's deeper.
the more you realize how much is going on beneath the surface.
Zach. And Riker, he keeps going. He even gets into how therapy itself, some types of therapy, might be encouraging a victim mentality.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
He talks about this guy, James. His therapist just kept validating all his complaints, and it backfired.
How so?
Instead of feeling better, James actually got more bitter and isolated, kept him stuck.
So the opposite of what therapy is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway there?
I think Riker's warning us about the dangers of focusing too much on what's wrong with the world,
Yeah.
the external stuff. It's important to acknowledge real injustices.
For sure.
But if we only focus on that, it can stop us from taking control of our own lives.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Recognizing the problems, but not letting them define you.
Right, because there are things you can control. You can become the best version of yourself, even if you think the system is rigged.
Okay, so this definitely resonates with the married red pill guys out there.
I think so.
It's not about denying their problems, but it's about saying, hey, I can still take action. I can still make positive changes.
You have agency.
Right. So it's not about being a victim. It's about being like a victor,
I like that.
taking control of your life,
Honing in.
making things happen.
And sometimes that means questioning some of the narratives we've been told, those deeply ingrained societal.
Ooh, okay. I think this is where things get really interesting because now Riker goes after progressive ideologies, right?
He does. Critical theory, feminism.
Whoa, okay. Strong stuff.
But again, he's not saying all feminist ideas are bad.
Right.
He's just asking, are some of these ideas hurting men? Even if that's not the intention.
Like, give me an example. What specifically is he talking about?
Well, he brings up this idea of deconstructing masculinity.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And he's asking, has it gone too far?
Like, how so?
Well, think about some traditional male traits. Stoicism, being assertive, the drive to provide.
Yeah.
Are those always bad things?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Definitely something we talk about a lot in the red pill community. What does it mean to be a man today?
Exactly.
Especially with all these conflicting messages flying around.
Exactly. And for the married red pill guys, think about how these ideologies might be showing up in your own marriage.
Oh, yeah.
Your expectations, your behavior. Could those be causing friction without you even realizing it?
This is deep, man.
It is. But I think these are the conversations we need to be having
I agree.
if we want to figure out what's going on and how to make things better.
This is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started. For those of you who want to go deeper, I highly recommend checking out Mad Women by Conrad Riker. It's on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books.
You can find links in the show notes.
And make sure you're back for part 2. We'll be diving into Riker's historical perspective on how all this has played out over time.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So picking up where we left off, all these changes we've been talking about, they didn't just appear out of thin air, right?
Right.
Riker, in this book, he goes way back, way back, to show us how these problems we're facing. They actually have deep roots, historical roots.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Take me back in time.
Think about traditional societies, right?
Yeah.
The way things used to be. Who had the power?
I mean, it's pretty obvious. Men were usually the ones in charge, triarchy and all that.
Exact. Fathers, they were the head honchos of the family. Their authority, nobody questioned it. But then society started changing. Evolved. Riker says the Industrial Revolution, that was a big turning point.
How so?
Well, men, they started getting pulled away from their homes to work in factories, And those traditional family units, they started to shift.
So the Industrial Revolution kind of messed with that whole man as provider thing.
You got it.
And maybe that's when these covert contracts, the unspoken agreements, started to get rewritten.
You're on the right track. And right around the same time, psychotherapy, it's emerging as this new field. But guess what? It started challenging those old ideas about what it meant to be a man.
Oh, really? How so?
Suddenly, being stoic, being strong and silent, that wasn't the ideal anymore. It
Interesting.
was all about emotions, expressing yourself, talking about your feelings.
It's like those old westerns,
Yeah.
Strong, silent cowboy.
Yeah.
Never talking about his feelings. So therapy was pushing a different kind of man. One that wasn't really in line with those old patriarchal values.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
And don't forget, this is also when feminism is gaining momentum.
Right.
Now, feminism has done a lot of good, no doubt.
Of course.
But Riker argues that it also played a role in this idea that traditional masculinity, well, it was a problem that needed fixing.
So those core male traits, they got redefined as negative.
Yeah, think about it. Stoicism became repression. Assertiveness became aggression. And providing for your family, that became control.
Wow. So those traits basically got flipped on their heads. Pretty interesting how that happened.
Right. And here's another thing Riker points out. Who do you think dominates the field of therapy today?
What do I think? I'm going to say women.
Yep, spot on. The number of female therapists, it's exploded in recent decades.
Okay.
Now, again, nothing wrong with that in itself. But Riker suggests, and this is an interesting point, he suggests it might have created some blind spots.
Blind spots? What do you mean?
Well, imagine this.
Okay.
A guy goes to therapy. He's trying to talk about his struggles, but he's doing it in that, traditional masculine way.
Yeah.
But his therapist, she's a woman, and her worldview, it might be heavily influenced by feminist ideals.
I see where you're going with this.
The question is, will she truly understand where he's coming from?
That's a good question. Yeah. Like, imagine trying to explain the red pill to someone who's never even heard of it.
Exactly. They just wouldn't get it. And that can lead to men feeling like, alienated.
Yeah.
If you don't belong, like the very system that's supposed to help them,
Yeah.
it's actually rejecting them.
So maybe that's why we're seeing guys turn to these red pill communities online. They're looking for that understanding.
That's what Riker's suggesting. They're looking for solutions, for validation in places where they feel heard.
It's making more and more sense. Riker, he doesn't just stop at feminism, does he? He connects all this to the over-medication epidemic, too.
Right, he does.
Especially when it comes to kids, right? Like the ADHD diagnosis.
Exactly. He really dives into that.
Yeah, because that's a huge concern for a lot of our listeners, the married red pill guys.
Yeah.
We're seeing it firsthand with our own kids,
Absolutely. Riker, his point is, he's not denying that ADHD exists. He's just asking, are we being too quick to label these kids? What if some of them are just high energy? What if they just learn differently?
It's like, are we pathologizing normal boyhood?
That's the question he's posing.
It's funny. I was looking at these old pictures of classrooms from like the 1950s. Black and white photos, all the kids sitting in perfect rows, totally silent.
Oh, wow.
Could you imagine today's kids being forced into that kind of environment? They'd be bouncing off the wall.
Right. Times have changed. And Riker's point is, maybe we need to adapt to these different learning styles instead of just medicating them away.
Yeah, I agree. And what about the side effects of all these medications? It's not like they're harmless.
Right. And Riker actually talks about this one boy who, after starting meds, it was like he lost his spark, his personality.
It's scary to think about, like, are we doing more harm than good sometimes?
It's a legitimate concern.
So this all goes back to questioning the system, right? Maybe it's not just about boys being boys. Maybe the system itself is failing them.
Pushing them into a box they don't fit in.
And maybe even pushing them towards medication when they don't actually need it. It's a lot to think about.
It is. And it all circles back, doesn't it?
To what?
To those covert contracts.
Oh, of course.
Those unspoken expectations we have about how boys should behave. Are those expectations hurting them? Are we as men even contributing to the problem?
Whoa, that's a tough one. This whole historical perspective you've laid out, it's really eye-opening. It's like those covert contracts. They've been evolving for centuries, haven't they?
They have. And Riker's point is, if we want to understand where we are now and where we need to go from here, we have to understand that history.
It makes sense. And this is just the beginning, right? There's so much more to unpack here.
There is. Riker goes even deeper, exploring how therapy, in some cases, might actually be contributing to this mass hysteria.
Wait, hold on a second. Therapy causing mass hysteria, that sounds a bit extreme.
I know, right?
Like, how is that even possible?
Well, he points to things like group therapy. Now, group therapy, it can be helpful, for sure. But it can also create these echo chambers.
Oh, I see.
Where anxieties and fears, they just get amplified, bounced back and forth between people.
It's like that saying, misery loves company.
Right.
If you're constantly surrounded by negativity, it's going to rub off on you.
Exactly. And then you add in social media.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other beast.
Riker describes it as a breeding ground for mass hysteria. We're constantly bombarded with bad news, negative opinions, 247. It's hard to escape that.
It's like we're living in this perpetual state of anxiety fueled by algorithms designed to keep us hooked on outrage.
It's a scary thought. And Riker's point is, all this negativity, it can warp our sense of reality.
It makes us more prone to fear, more susceptible to those conspiracy theories.
He thinks so.
It's starting to sound a little red pillish, isn't it?
It does tie in, yeah. Now, Riker isn't saying that everything the red pill community believes is true, but he's acknowledging that there are legitimate reasons why some men are feeling disillusioned,
Right.
why they're distrustful of those mainstream narratives.
So it's not about just blindly accepting everything you read online, but about being critical of the information that's coming at you.
Exactly. Think for yourself. Question everything, especially in this day and age, with information overload everywhere you turn.
This is heavy stuff, but I think it's important for us as married red pill guys to understand these bigger societal forces that are shaping our lives, our relationships.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture. And Riker, he doesn't shy away from tackling some of the most controversial topics out there, like the influence of progressive ideologies.
Okay, let's talk about that. Progressive ideology, what's Riker's take on that?
He argues that while these ideologies, things like critical theory, they're often presented as being about social justice, about equality.
Right.
He thinks they've actually had some unintended and negative consequences.
Like what? Give me some example. What specifically is he talking about?
Well, one big one is intersectionality.
Oh yeah, I've heard that term thrown around. What's the issue with intersectionality?
Okay, so intersectionality, it's the idea that different forms of oppression, like racism, sexism, they're all connected.
Right, I get that.
And they sort sort of reinforce each other.
Okay.
Now, Riker's not denying that these injustices exist, but he argues that this concept is often oversimplified and misapplied.
How so?
Well, it's become this lens through which everything is viewed, and that can lead to a really distorted perception of reality.
So instead of focusing on individual circumstances, it's all about group identity. Like who's the oppressor and who's the oppressed.
Right. And Riker's concern is that this constant focus on oppression, it creates a culture of victimhood.
Where people are always focused on how they're being disadvantaged.
Exactly.
And this ties back to the red pill,
Yeah.
right? Like a lot of men feel like they're being demonized just for being men. Like they're automatically the oppressors.
Exactly. And Riker argues that this kind of black and white thinking, oppressors versus oppressed,
Yeah.
it's not helpful. It prevents us from having honest conversations about the complexities of gender and power.
So it's not about denying that oppression exists, but finding a more nuanced approach.
Right. One that doesn't pit men and women against each other. One that recognizes the gray areas.
Riker's saying this focus on victimhood, it's actually preventing us from making progress.
He thinks so. Yeah.
It's keeping us stuck in this cycle of blame and resentment.
Exactly.
So how do we break free from that? What's the way out?
Riker believes we need to shift our focus away from blaming external forces and towards personal responsibility.
So it's about recognizing that, yes, there are systemic issues, but we still have agency within those systems.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, acknowledging the injustices, but also taking ownership of your own choices, your own actions.
And I think that message, that resonates with the married red pill community.
I think so too.
It's about taking control. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, even if you feel like the world is rigged against you.
That's a powerful message.
And it's not easy, but it's worth striving for.
Absolutely. And part of that, Riker says, is recognizing our own covert contracts, those unspoken agreements we've internalized, and choosing to rewrite them, choosing to create new agreements that work better for us, for our relationship.
This is really making me think about my own life, my own marriage. What are my covert contracts? And how are they affecting my relationship?
It's about self-awareness. It's about questioning the narratives we've been given.
And finding our own path.
Exactly.
I feel like my mind is expanding just listening to this.
Good. That's the goal.
And we're not even done yet. There's still so much more to explore in Riker's book.
Oh yeah, we've just scratched the surface.
This is incredible.
He goes on to talk about gender ideology, its impact on therapy.
Oh, wow. That's a hot button issue.
It is. But Riker doesn't shy away from it.
I can't wait to hear his take on that.
It's fascinating, and it's definitely going to challenge some assumptions, but that's what we're here for, right?
Exactly. To challenge our thinking, to expand our understanding of the world.
To question everything.
This is why I love these deep dives.
Me too. It's all about expanding our perspectives, becoming more informed, more engaged.
And for those of you listening who are eager to hear more, don't forget to check out Mad Women by Conrad Riker. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Links are in the show notes.
And be sure to join us for part 3. We'll be delving into Riker's exploration of the over-medication epidemic, the victim mindset, and his proposed solutions for, as he calls it, reversing the madness of modern psychotherapy.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Okay, so we're back. Last time, things got pretty intense. Riker's critique of progressive ideology. Wow.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back, does he?
Not at all. But like we said, it's about looking at things from different angles, right? Even if they make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is key.
So let's keep going down this rabbit hole. We're about to get into Riker's take on gender ideology. That's a huge EE topic right now.
It is, and it ties directly into therapy, which is what this whole deep dive is about.
Okay, so gender ideology. Break it down for me. What's Riker's main point?
He sees it as a real danger, honestly, especially for young people. The basic idea is that gender is totally separate from biological sex.
Right, like you can choose your gender regardless of your body.
Exactly. And Riker thinks that's leading to some troubling trends.
Like what? What's he concerned about?
Well, look at the explosion in gender dysphoria diagnoses.
Yeah, that's been in the news a lot lately.
He's not denying that gender dysphoria exists, okay,
Right.
but he's questioning this massive increase, especially among kids. Could it be tied to social pressure, to this idea that you can be any gender you want, regardless of your body?
So it's like, instead of helping kids feel comfortable with who they are, we're telling them they could be whoever they want to be.
And that can be a dangerous message, he thinks, especially when it leads to medical intervention.
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky. I mean, we want to support kids, right? But is there a line? Are we going too far with this whole affirmation thing?
That's exactly what Riker's asking. He's worried about this affirmative care approach. Where therapists just automatically validate whatever gender identity the child expresses, even if it changes all the time.
Right.
He thinks that's stopping kids from actually working through those feelings.
And coming to terms with their biological sex.
Exactly.
It makes you think, right? Like, are we confusing genuine gender dysphoria with I don't know, normal childhood exploration, maybe even peer pressure.
Those are valid questions. And Riker's saying, hey, let's slow down. Let's think about the long-term consequences, especially for kids who might not be ready to make those huge life-altering decisions.
Right, right. It's such a sensitive issue. I mean, you want to be supportive, but you also want what's best for the child in the long run.
And Riker's point is, maybe what's best isn't always immediate affirmation. Maybe what these kids need is therapy to help them explore their identity, to develop a strong sense of self.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, isn't it? Support and critical thinking.
Exactly. It's not about denying anyone's right to live as they choose. It's about making sure those choices are truly informed and well thought out.
This is really making me think. It's not easy stuff to grapple with, but I'm glad we're talking about it.
Me too. And the good news is, Riker doesn't just leave us with these critiques. He actually offers solutions.
Oh, okay, good. Because it can get a little depressing, just focusing on all the problems.
I know what you mean. But Riker, he's all about action. He wants to see real change. He wants us to move away from this victim mentality and towards personal responsibility.
Yeah, that's a big theme in his book, right?
Oh, wow.
Owning your life. But what does that actually look like? Give me some specifics.
Well, first, he challenges us to change the way we think.
Okay.
Stop focusing on all the negative stuff. Stop blaming others for your problems.
Easier said than done.
It's not easy, for sure, but it starts with awareness, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing those negative thought patterns and choosing to interrupt them.
So it's about taking control of your thoughts, your mindset.
Exact. And then, he says, focus on what you can control. Set goals. Take action. Don't just sit around complaining.
So less complaining, more doing.
Exactly. He's all about action, remember?
Right, right.
And then he talks about embracing personal responsibility. Now, this doesn't mean denying that bad things happen.
Of course not.
It means owning your choices, your behaviors, your part in things. No more excuses.
This definitely aligns with a lot of the red pill thinking, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, even when life throws you curveballs.
Even when the world feels unfair.
Exactly. And that's where resilience comes in. Riker talks a lot about that. That ability to bounce back from setbacks, to learn from your mistakes.
To keep moving forward.
That's the key.
I think that's something we can all relate to, right? Especially in the married red pill community. We're all about facing those challenges head on, figuring out how to make our relationships stronger.
It's the same principle. And then Riker introduces this concept of a growth mindset.
Growth mindset.
Okay, I'm listening. It's basically the belief that you can always learn and improve.
I like that.
Instead of seeing challenges as roadblocks, you see them as opportunities for growth.
So like instead of saying, I'm stuck, I can't do this, you say, okay, how can I learn from this? How can I get better?
That's the idea.
I love it. It's about turning those negative experiences into something positive.
Exact. And finally, Riker encourages us to explore alternative therapy.
Oh, interesting. So he's not a fan of traditional talk therapy.
He's pretty critical of it, yeah. He thinks it can sometimes reinforce that victim mentality we've been talking about.
Makes sense. So what are some of the alternatives he suggests? What does he think works better?
Well, he mentions cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Right, I've heard of that.
It focuses on changing those negative thought patterns. And then there's mindfulness meditation, which can be really helpful for stress and emotional regulation.
Yeah, I've heard good things about mindfulness.
And even exercise, believe it or not.
Exercise.
Yeah, tons of research shows how good it is for your mental health.
So it's about taking a holistic approach, recognizing that mental health isn't just about talking to a therapist. It's about taking care of your whole self, your body, your mind, your spirit.
You got it. It's about being proactive, taking ownership of your well-being.
And this all leads to Riker's final point, which I think is really powerful. It's about reclaiming our power.
That's it.
But what does he mean by that?
He thinks we've given too much power away to therapists, to experts, to the system. He wants us to become more informed, more empowered advocates for our own mental health.
So it's about doing your own research, asking questions, not being afraid to challenge the status quo, kind of like what we're doing here on the deep dive, right?
Exactly. It's about taking an active role in your own healing journey, not just passively accepting what someone tells you.
This has been an amazing journey, man. Riker's book, it's really made me think about things in a whole new way.
Me too. And remember, guys, this was just a glimpse into Mad Women. If you want the full experience, if you're ready to really take the red pill on modern psychotherapy,
You got to read the book.
definitely.
It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
We'll have the links in the show notes.
So check it out. And in the meantime, keep those questions coming. Keep challenging those assumptions. Keep searching for those solutions. That's what this is all about.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been a pleasure, as always, diving into these ideas with you.
And with all of you listening. Thanks for being here. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep pushing for a better future. Take care.